While my husband was showering, a message from my best friend of 12 years popped up. I miss you. I want to see you. I took his phone and, pretending to be him, replied, my wife isn't home. Come quickly. 6 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door without confronting her, but what I discovered afterward in our accounts turned that affair into something far more serious. The doorbell rang 6 minutes after I invited her over. 6 minutes. I've thought about that number more than any other in this whole story. Not the $38,000. Not the 14 entries in the camera log. 6 minutes. Because that's how long it takes to drive from Stephanie Doyle's condo to my front door if you catch the light on Neil Avenue. And because 6 minutes means she was already dressed, already perfumed, already sitting somewhere with her keys in her hand, waiting for a man to tell her the coast was clear. My husband was still in the shower. I could hear the water hitting the tile, that hollow drumming sound, and underneath it, the tuneless humming he did when he was happy. His phone was face up on the kitchen counter next to a bowl of grapes. 10:17 p.m. Stephanie. No greeting, no emoji. Just, I miss you. I want to see you. Can you? My best friend since our sophomore year at Ohio State. 12 years. I held her hand in a courthouse hallway through the worst week of her divorce. I paid for her daughter's ballet recital tickets when her card got declined, and I never once brought it up again. I picked up his phone. I typed with my thumbs, steady as anything. Come now. Brooke isn't home. Then I sat down at my own kitchen table, in my own house, and waited. My hands didn't shake at all. That's what scared me. Not the message. Not the 6 minutes. The fact that some part of me had already known long enough that my body didn't need to react. I'd been married to Calvin Aldridge for 4 years, and I'd been auditing hospital claims for 7. That job matters, so let me explain it before I get back to the door. I'm a senior revenue integrity auditor at Cardinal Ridge Health System. 8 hours a day I sit with 2 windows open, what a chart says happened to a patient, and what a bill says we charged for it. And I find the places where those two disagree. Usually it's nothing sinister. People are tired, software auto-populates, a coder guesses. But sometimes a number is wrong on purpose, and after 7 years, you learn what that looks like. Deliberate wrong numbers are tidy, rounded, consistent. They repeat on a schedule. Honest mistakes are messy and random. Fraud has a rhythm. People always ask how I put it together so fast. I'm not a savant. I do it every day to strangers, and it never once occurred to me to do it to my own life. Calvin was 38, a regional sales director for Halverson Medical Supply, the kind of man who remembered every hostess's name. He wore his charm like cologne, a little too much, but it worked. He handled our mortgage, our insurance, our taxes. I let him. It felt like partnership. He'd say, I've got the boring stuff, you've got the interesting brain, and there'd be a card on the counter on my birthday with something in it that made me cry. Stephanie was my other half of everything. Divorced at 30, 1 daughter, Josie, 9, obsessed with sharks, who called me Aunt Brookie. Stephanie was a senior loan officer and commissioned notary at Buckeye Trust Credit Union, and she was funny in that dry, unimpressed way that made you work for it. The 3 of us did Sunday dinners. That's what I keep coming back to. Sunday dinners. There were signs. There are always signs. And afterward, you line them up and want to scream at the woman who saw them and shrugged. Last spring, Calvin bought a crosscut shredder for a household that had gone paperless 3 years earlier. He started collecting the mail himself every day before I got home. In April, he switched our statements to paperless for the environment, which was rich, coming from a man who idled his RAV4 for 40 minutes in a Kroger lot to keep the AC cold. And one Sunday in May, Stephanie stood in my hallway, looking at the ceiling and asked how the light in here was in the mornings. I said, "Are you house hunting?" She said, something like that. The doorbell rang at 10:23. I opened it. Stephanie stood on my mat in a red dress and heels she genuinely could not walk in, and the perfume came through the door ahead of her like weather. She froze. Everything in her face stopped. "Brooke, what are you doing here?" "I live here," I said. The color went out of her the way it goes out of a photograph in the sun, top down. I watched it happen. I was just in the neighborhood. 6 minutes after my husband asked you over. What a coincidence. Behind me, the bathroom door opened, and I heard bare feet on hardwood. Calvin came into the front hall in a towel, still dripping, one hand rubbing his hair. He looked at her. He looked at me, and I knew everything before a single word got said, because his eyes went to her first, and they went there the way you look at someone whose safety is your responsibility. "What are you doing here?" he said to her, way too fast. I held up his phone so he could read the screen. "That's what I'd like to know." Stephanie started crying, real crying, the ugly kind, her hand over her mouth, and Calvin stepped in front of her, put himself between her and me in my own hallway, like I was the danger in the room. That hurt worse than anything either of them said that night. I want to be precise about it. The affair was a knife, but that step was the twist. "Don't attack her," he snapped. "You've got a problem? You bring it to me." "Since when?" Silence. The shower was still running. Nobody had turned it off. That detail lived in my head for months, the water going and going while all this happened. "Since when have you been sleeping with my best friend?" 6 months, Calvin said, just like that. No negotiation, no denial. No, it's not what it looks like. 6 months, delivered the way you'd tell a client a shipping date. 12 years of friendship, 4 years of marriage, 6 months of both of them looking at my face across a table and deciding it was fine. "Get out," I said, "both of you." He laughed. That's the part people don't believe, but he did. A short, disbelieving huff. "Brooke, calm down. You're blowing this up. You brought my best friend into our home. Which part am I blowing up?" And then he said the thing that finished it. He said it the way a man plays a card he's been holding all night. If you can't understand how I feel about Stephanie, we should just get divorced. And I caught it. The corner of Stephanie's mouth, 1/8 of an inch. A smile she could not hold in, there and gone in the time it takes to blink. And if I hadn't been looking directly at her, I'd have missed it and my whole life would be different. She wasn't horrified. She was waiting. She'd been waiting in a red dress for 6 minutes, and she'd been waiting for that sentence for longer. Something in my chest went cold and very, very clear. Not calm, clear. There's a difference. Calm is peace. Clear is when the noise cuts out and you can suddenly read all the small print. Okay, I said, let's get divorced. Both smiles died at the exact same moment. It was almost synchronized. I packed one suitcase in 11 minutes. Not clothes. Some clothes jammed in on top. But first, the folder with the deed, my passport, my birth certificate, the title to my car, both laptops. The external drive, 3 years of tax returns out of a fireproof box in the coat closet that Calvin bought and I had never once opened. Calvin stood in the hallway with his arms braced on either side of the frame. You walk out that door, he said. You've got nothing to come back to. That's the whole point. He moved. Nobody touched anybody. The worst thing in my house that night was a sentence. But I got into my Outback and sat there a full minute before I could make my hand turn the key. And when I looked up at the front window, Stephanie was standing in my living room with her arms folded like she was measuring for curtains. I drove to Kristen Vo's apartment in Clintonville. Kristen has been an ICU nurse for 11 years, and ICU nurses do not panic, which is why I called her instead of my mother. She poured me a glass of wine, sat down across from me, and said one useful thing. Before you cry, check the bank. Loop 1. The statements. I told myself I was doing it for closure. That's a lie people tell before they open a spreadsheet. I logged into our joint account at 12:41 a.m. on Kristen's couch, her cat asleep against my leg, and pulled 6 months of activity into a CSV, because that's how my brain reads money. Not as a web page, as columns. And there it was. The Rowan Hotel downtown. 4 separate stays. 412, 412, 538, 612. Delta. 2 round trips to Charleston in June. $140. A restaurant on Gay Street I'd never eaten at. 11 visits. A spa in German Village. A florist. A florist 11 times, which is what got me, because in 4 years of marriage, Calvin gave me flowers twice, and both times were apologies. And every single date lined up with something. Client dinner, babe. Regional thing. Guys weekend. Charleston. Hendrix is turning 40. Late one. Don't wait up. I built a 2-column sheet at 1 in the morning. The charge on the left, the excuse on the right, out of my own text history, which I never deleted because I never delete anything. 6 months, 31 matches. My stomach dropped somewhere around row 19 and never really came back up. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was invoicing me for it. Every hotel room came out of the account my paycheck went into on the 15th and the 30th. I ran the total at 2:14 a.m., $23,708. I sat there in the dark with the laptop fan going, thinking very distinctly, that's not the whole number, because it was too tidy, because the account never went below $4,000. A man who spends $24,000 he doesn't have, on top of a mortgage and 2 cars, leaves a hole somewhere, and I couldn't find the hole. Money doesn't evaporate. It moves. And if I couldn't see where it came from, that meant there was a room in my own financial life I had never been shown. I also had one other thing that night, and I need to be honest about it because it matters later. My old Samsung tablet, the one in my nightstand drawer I'd stopped using 2 years ago, was still signed into Calvin's message account from a trip to Hilton Head. He never thought to check. I opened it once, at 3:05 a.m., read 4 messages, put it face down on Kristen's coffee table, and did not touch it again. I'd like to say that was restraint. It wasn't. It was the auditor in me. Because the first rule of building a case that will actually survive contact with another human being is, never let the strongest thing you have be the thing you weren't supposed to have. Wednesday, 9:00 a.m. Ashley Keenan has 19 years in contested divorce work and a 4th-floor office on East Broad with a window unit that rattled the whole time we talked. She wore reading glasses on a chain and did not once tell me she was sorry. I liked her immediately. She listened for 20 minutes without writing anything. Then she wrote for 10 without saying anything. Okay, 3 things. 1. Your father made the down payment on that apartment. $41,000. Out of a CD he broke early, 8 months before the wedding. Cashier's check straight to the title company. I have the copy. She underlined something. Traceable separate property. Gifts to one spouse. Traced. Stay with that spouse. Get me the check, the closing disclosure, and your father's bank record showing the withdrawal. All 3, not 2. 2. Your car came from your personal account before the marriage. Fine. Boring. Keep it that way. 3. She took the glasses off. You said marital funds went to a third party. Say that part again. Slower. I said it slower. She sat back. Ohio is an equitable distribution state. Section 3105. 171 has a financial misconduct provision. Dissipation, concealment, fraudulent disposition of marital assets. If I can prove he spent marital money on a paramour, the court can make a distributive award to compensate you. It's not automatic and it's not punitive damages, but it's real and it changes every number in the settlement. How do I prove it? You don't prove it, you document it, and then I prove it. She pointed her pen at me. Now, the tablet. I'd told her. Of course I'd told her. Don't open it again, she said. Don't open it once. Not to look, not to screenshot, not to check. Ohio has statutes about unauthorized access to another person's electronic accounts, and even where it's murky, the second we rely on it. This stops being a case about what he did and becomes a case about what you did. Opposing counsel will spend 9 months on it. Judges hate it. So I just throw away the one thing that proves it doesn't prove anything. I can't get cleaner. She smiled, not warmly, but like a person who has done this 200 times. Everything we use, you're going to have an independent right to. Your own accounts, your own property, your own name on the paper. A file that's half evidence and half poison is worth less than 1/3 the size and completely clean. I put the tablet in a Ziploc bag that afternoon, wrote the date on it in Sharpie, and gave it to Kristen to hold in her closet. I never opened it again. For the first time in 2 days, the floor stopped moving. Loop 2, the hallway. That afternoon, I let myself into my own apartment with my own key. Ashley had confirmed I had every right to be there, and Calvin was at work, because I'd remembered something on the drive over that made my ears ring. The hallway camera. We'd installed it 18 months earlier after a package theft in the building. Calvin mounted it. Calvin aimed it. Calvin forgot one detail. Footage saves to the cloud on a subscription billed monthly to my card, under my email, because I set it up while he was on a call. I sat on my own living room floor with my back against the couch and scrolled backward through 6 months of a hallway. 11:40 p.m., Stephanie letting herself in. She had a key. She used it like someone who'd used it before. No fumbling. 5:15 a.m., Stephanie leaving, shoes in her hand. I built a log. Timestamp in, timestamp out, duration, and this is the column that did it to me, a 4th column for where I was. At my mother's in Delaware County. Indianapolis, Coding and Documentation Summit, room 714. Working late, Cardinal Ridge, badged out 11:52 p.m., 14 times in 6 months. And then I got to entry 8, and my hands finally did what they hadn't done at the door. August 22nd, in at 11:40 p.m., out at 5:15 a.m. That was the night my father had a stent placed at Riverside. Emergency cath lab. I was in a vinyl chair in a waiting room from 9 p.m. until 6 in the morning, and at 1:14 a.m., I texted Calvin. He's out. They said it went well. I love you. And he replied, thank God. Get some sleep. Love you too. He typed that with her in our bed. I made it to the bathroom before I was sick. Then I washed my face, sat down on the floor again, and finished the log. All 14 entries. I exported the source files to an external drive, hashed each one, and wrote down the date, time, and method of collection the way I would for any audit, because a finding without provenance is just a story, and I was not going to spend my life being called a story. Loop 3, the box. I wasn't looking for it. I was looking for the closing disclosure Ashley wanted. It was in Calvin's bureau, in the back of the second drawer, under a folded stack of undershirts he never wore. Black velvet. Hinged. A diamond necklace. 3 stones on a white gold chain. The tag was still on it. I sat on the edge of the bed I hadn't slept in for 2 nights, and turned it over in the light, and thought, absurdly, she hasn't gotten it yet. Whatever occasion it was for hadn't happened. $38,000. I knew the number before I read it. I'd seen it 9 hours earlier in a column sitting in March. $38,000. 1 line, 1 day. A debit I couldn't source to anything in my life. It had been in my chest all day like a swallowed stone. I photographed it. The necklace, the tag, the drawer it came from, the closed bureau, and I put it back exactly where it had been, undershirts and all. And here's where it stopped being a story about a husband and a friend. Because I sat down at my own kitchen table with the 6-month CSV open, and I did the thing I do for a living. I stopped looking at what went out. I looked at what came in. Our joint checking never dipped below $4,000. Not once in 6 months. 2 paychecks in, roughly $19,000 a month going out, and now an extra $4,000 a month of hotels and florists on top of a $38,000 March. That isn't arithmetic. That's a magic trick, which meant money was coming from somewhere I couldn't see. 5 deposits that weren't payroll, $9,000, $12,000, $38,000. Same day as the necklace, in and out within 4 hours. $6,500, $7,200. All from the same source, and the source line said the same 9 characters every time. BTCU XFR, Buckeye Trust Credit Union, where Stephanie worked. I did not have an account at Buckeye Trust Credit Union. I sat there with my hands flat on the table and did not move for a long time. Thursday, 7 p.m., Marlowe's. I texted Calvin Wednesday night. Dinner tomorrow? I want to talk. He answered in under a minute. Of course he did. He thought I was caving. 4 years of marriage, and his read on me was that I'd panic and negotiate. I picked Marlowe's on purpose. Marlowe's is a steakhouse on 3rd with green leather booths, and every Thursday since before I met him, the Halverson regional sales team has eaten there. Not sometimes. Every Thursday. He showed up in the blue Oxford I bought him for his birthday. He ordered the ribeye, medium. He talked about counseling, a name he'd looked into, a book he'd started. I let him finish every bite. I asked how the steak was. He said it was good. Then the plates were cleared, and I put a folder on the white tablecloth and laid it out 1 page at a time, turned to face him. The 2-column sheet. Charges left, his texts right. The camera log. 14 rows. A still from August 22nd at 11:41 p.m. Time stamped. Her face perfectly clear under the hall light. The photograph of the necklace. Tag on in the drawer. His face went a color I'd never seen on a living person. Gray isn't right. Gray is a color. This was the absence of one. Brooke, you're going to sign a settlement, I said. The apartment stays mine. My father's down payment traced, and my lawyer has the cashier's check. The car stays mine. We close the joint accounts Monday, and you repay half of every dollar of marital money you spent on her. You went through my things. I went through our bank account, which has my name on it, and I stood in my own hallway. His hand came down flat on the table, hard enough to jump the water glasses. You're insane! No, I said. I'm documented. He stood up. 2 tables over, a man in a quarter zip set down his fork. Doug Merrill, Calvin's regional VP. I knew him from the Christmas party. At the long table by the window, 6 people from the Ohio Valley Territory stopped talking mid-sentence. The whole room was watching now, in that specific restaurant way where everyone looks and pretends they aren't. And Calvin, a man who could remember every hostess's name, lost it completely. Stephanie and I are in love, he shouted, into a steakhouse, in front of his regional VP and 6 direct reports, and about 40 strangers. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I have never in my life needed to say less. Okay, I said. And then his phone lit up on the tablecloth between us, face up, screen bright in the low light, and Stephanie's name filled it with a message anyone within 4 feet could read. Parking now. Is she really gone? He looked at it. He looked at me. I picked up my purse and I left him standing there in the middle of his own department. Loop 4. The line. I got back to Kristen's at 8:40 p.m. and didn't cry. I want that on the record because everybody assumes I did. I sat down at her kitchen table with a glass of water and pulled my own credit report. Not a score, not an app. The actual free annual file from all 3 bureaus that nobody ever reads. It took 9 minutes to load and about 4 seconds to find it. Buckeye Trust Credit Union. Home. Equity line of credit. Opened. 0814. Prior year. Limit. $95,000. Balance. $48,200. Responsibility. Joint secured against the apartment. My apartment. The one my father broke a certificate of deposit for 8 months before my wedding. Sitting at a kitchen table in Westerville with a pen, saying this is so you always have somewhere to go. I had never seen that account in my life. I had never applied for it. I had never signed anything. 14 months, 8 months before Calvin ever met Stephanie for a drink, which meant the affair wasn't the beginning of anything. The affair was something he'd been able to afford. I left a message on Ashley Keenan's after hours line. Then I did the only thing available at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night. Wrote every question I had in a numbered list, because a list is something you can act on and panic isn't. Question 1 was, whose signature is on it? Friday 9 a.m., Buckeye Trust Credit Union, Grandview Branch. Here's a thing most people don't know, and it saved me. If your name is on a loan as a borrower, you're entitled to a copy of your own loan file. No lawyer, no subpoena, just your ID and the patience to stand at a counter while a very nice young man photocopies 40 pages, 50 minutes. I read it standing up in the lobby. My employer, correct. My income, correct to the dollar. My date of birth, my social security number. And on page 11, the note with 2 signatures at the bottom. Calvin's, that lazy vertical C that never closed, and mine, which wasn't. It was close. Whoever did it had practiced. But I signed Brooke R. Aldridge, middle initial, not middle name, since I was 17, on every check and chart and audit finding I have ever put my hand to. Page 11 said Brooke Renner Aldridge, written out, every letter. I stood in a credit union lobby holding 40 photocopied pages and felt the floor tilt for the second time that week. And then I turned to page 12, the notarial certificate, the block at the bottom where a commissioned officer of the state of Ohio swears that a human being physically stood in front of them, produced identification, and signed. Subscribed and sworn before me this 14th day of August. A stamp, a raised seal, flattened by the copier into a gray smear, but legible. Stephanie M. Doyle, Notary Public, State of Ohio. My commission expires 6/2027. I read it 4 times. 12 years, sophomore year. Her hand in a courthouse hallway. Josie calling me Aunt Brookie across the table on a Sunday. She hadn't just slept with my husband. She had put her seal on a lie about my body being in a room, and she had done it 8 months before she ever slept with him. And the lie was collateralized by the roof my father bought me. That was the moment it stopped being a divorce. That's forgery. That's a felony. And under Ohio's notary statutes, a false certificate isn't a paperwork error. It's the whole reason notaries exist. I sat in the Grandview parking lot with the engine off for 11 minutes. Then I drove to a UPS store and made 3 complete copies before anything else, because the first thing that happens when you find something like this is that the original becomes the most fragile object in your life. Loop 5, the other account. Ashley's associate got me Priya Raghunathan on Friday afternoon. CPA, CFF, CFE, 23 years, half of them tracing marital assets in exactly this kind of mess. She took my CSVs, the loan file, and my hallway log, and called back in 4 hours with a voice like a weather report. You have 3 separate things happening, she said, and you've been treating them like one. Thing 1 is the affair spending. $23,708 out of joint funds plus the necklace. That's your dissipation claim. Thing 2 is the line of credit. $95,000 limit, $48,200 drawn. 5 draws went into your joint checking, which is what you found. 6 didn't. My mouth went dry. Where did those go? An account in his name only, different institution, opened the same week as the line, and there's activity in it. She paused. Reimbursements from Halverson Medical Supply, bi-weekly, in amounts consistent with expense reports. I closed my eyes. Ms. Aldridge, I want to be careful. I'm not saying anything about his employer yet, but your husband billed a company for client dinners on nights his card shows 1 bottle of wine and 2 entrees, and he was reimbursed to a private account you didn't know existed. That's a pattern with a name, and the name isn't affair fair. Why open the line at all? He makes good money. Commission clawbacks, she said. I found the debits. Halverson advanced against deals that didn't close, then took it back. $61,300 over 4 quarters. He needed that fast. From a source his wife wouldn't see on a statement. There it was. The hole I'd known about since 2:14 in the morning on Kristen's couch. He didn't build the line of credit to fund an affair. He built it to hide a hole. Then the line sat there, available. $95,000 of my father's roof. And it turned out a man will spend anything that doesn't feel like it costs him. One more thing, Priya said. The notarization date, August 14th. I know. Where were you? I already had the answer because it had come to me at 3 a.m. and I hadn't slept since. Nashville, I said. HFMA annual. I flew out on the 13th. There was a long pause on the line. Ms. Aldridge, Priya said. And for the first time, her weather report voice moved. Do you have your badge scans? Friday, 4:52 p.m. Everything fell apart in 90 minutes. 4:52 p.m. My phone buzzed with a courtesy alert from Buckeye Trust. The kind you get because you're a joint obliger. Pending advance. $46,800. Initiated 4:41 p.m. Funds available Monday 8 a.m. $46,800. The entire remaining balance of the line, to the dollar. He'd sat in a steakhouse Thursday night, watched his own department watch him, and then he'd gone and pulled everything that was left. 5:04 p.m. I called the Buckeye Trust fraud line. I got a man who identified himself as Trevor, employee number 4471, perfectly polite for 18 minutes, explaining that both borrowers were on the note, that either could initiate a draw, and that they could not freeze it on a verbal report from one party in a domestic dispute. I said the word forgery. He said the phrase, I understand you're upset. I asked what would let them freeze it. A signed affidavit of forgery, presented in person, with supporting documentation, he said. Branch hours, or a court order. 5:19 p.m. I called the Columbus Police non-emergency line. The officer who took it was not unkind. He was tired. He told me that a joint account with both names on it, in the middle of a divorce, was a civil matter, and that I should bring it to the domestic relations court. And he was, from where he sat with 11 calls stacked behind mine, completely right. 5:31 p.m. Ashley Keenan's paralegal Deb called me back. Ashley was in the second day of a contested custody trial in Licking County and would be in it Monday. The earliest we could get in front of a magistrate for an ex parte motion to restrain marital assets was Tuesday afternoon. Tuesday. The money moved Monday at 5:47 p.m. An email from Calvin's attorney sent to Ashley and copying me. A preservation demand, alleging that I had accessed my husband's private electronic communications without authorization, and demanding I surrender all devices. He'd found out about the tablet, or guessed. It didn't matter which. I sat down on Kristen's kitchen floor with my back against the dishwasher. 6:02 p.m. Then my work phone rang. Wendell Pike, Cardinal Ridge's compliance officer. My stomach turned over, because I knew what it was before he said it. Halverson Medical Supply is a vendor to Cardinal Ridge Health System. Distribution contracts. 9 figures across the region. My husband worked for a company I audited against. I had never touched a Halverson line item. I'd recused myself on day 1, 4 years earlier, and it was in my file. But now there was a fraud allegation with my name on it. Wendell had to open a conflicts review, and by Monday, I'd be off my 3 largest accounts pending it. I had done everything right for 4 years, and I was still going to lose work over what he did. That's the part nobody puts in the story. Doing everything right doesn't make you safe. It just means that when it comes for you, you can prove it wasn't your fault. 5 systems, 90 minutes. Every single one of them said not now, not you, not tonight. The branch opened Saturday at 9 and closed at noon. 3 hours. That was the whole window. Friday night. I did the only thing I've ever been good at. I built the file. Kristen made coffee at 10 and again at 1 and stopped asking questions around 2. Priya stayed on a shared document until 3:40 a.m. and never once said, get some sleep. Exhibit A. The loan file, all 40 pages, certified copy request stamped by the branch that morning. Exhibit B. 14 signature samples of mine. My driver's license, my passport, my voter registration card, my Cardinal Ridge badge acknowledgement, 4 canceled checks, 5 signed audit findings. Brooke R. Aldridge, 14 out of 14. Not one Renner in the stack. Exhibit C. My Delta boarding passes. CMH to BNA, August 13th, 4:40 p.m. BNA to CMH, August 15th, 11:15 a.m. Exhibit D. The Marriott Folio, Nashville, 3 nights. Room 1114. 2 room charges on the 14th. A coffee at 7:52 a.m. and a bottle of water at 9:30 p.m. Exhibit E. The HFMA conference badge scan log, which I had requested by email at 11 p.m. and which a very confused conference services coordinator named Marisol sent me at 12:40 a.m. because I told her the truth. August 14th. Session 4B. Denials management in a post-audit environment. Badge scanned in at 1:52 p.m. Badge scanned out at 3:31 p.m. The notarial certificate said I personally appeared in Franklin County, Ohio at 2:15 p.m. on August 14th. At 2:15 p.m. On August 14th, I was in the Music City Center in Nashville, Tennessee, 400 miles away, in a room with roughly 300 other people, listening to a man from Cleveland talk about denial write-off thresholds. Exhibit F. My CEU certificate for that session, issued by a national professional body, with my license number on it. I printed everything twice, tabbed it, and wrote a 2-page cover memo in exactly the format I use at work. Observation, criteria, criteria, condition, cause, effect, recommendation. And then, at 4:10 in the morning, I noticed something on page 12 that I'd read 6 times without seeing. The Notary Journal reference line. The ID presented. An Ohio driver's license number recorded by hand. It wasn't my license number. It was the number of my previous license. The expired one. The one that had been sitting in the ceramic dish on my dresser for 2.5 years because I kept meaning to shred it and never did. Somebody had gone into my bedroom, taken an expired card out of a dish, written the number down, and put it back. I stopped being frightened somewhere around then. I've tried to explain it, and I can't. It's not courage. It's the opposite of adrenaline. Everything went very quiet and very organized, and I made another cup of coffee and updated the memo. Saturday, 9 a.m. I was outside the Grandview branch at 8:41. The manager, Alonzo Ferrer, listened to the first 90 seconds and then held up one hand and said, "Ma'am, stop. Please sit down. I'm calling someone." Nadine Whitlock got there at 9:35 on a Saturday in jeans. 11 years in credit union fraud investigation. And she read my cover memo standing at the counter without taking her coat off. She pulled the loan file. She pulled the signature card. And then she made a phone call and asked someone to bring her the branch notary log for last August because Stephanie Doyle had performed that notarization in her capacity as an employee of Buckeye Trust Credit Union on Buckeye Trust premises, which meant the journal wasn't Stephanie's private property. It was in the building. Nadine put the journal on the counter and turned it toward me. August 14th, entry 7. Brooke Renner Aldridge, personally appeared. 2:15 p.m. ID, ODL, and the number. She laid the boarding pass next to it, then the folio, then the badge scan log. Then she got to Exhibit B, the 14 signatures, and she looked at the note on page 11, and she looked back at the 14, and she said one word. Renner. I haven't signed it that way since high school, I said. Nadine Whitlock closed the journal, picked up the phone, and put a hold on the line of credit at 10:41 a.m. Saturday morning. The $46,800 never moved. What happened after? Detective Ray Okonjo of the Columbus Division of Police Financial Crimes Unit has 15 years in and a desk with 3 monitors and 1 photograph on it. He took my report on a Tuesday. He was honest in the first 10 minutes. Most of what crosses his desk from a divorce goes nowhere because it's 2 people's word and a shoebox. He'd told 100 people what the desk officer told me Friday night, and he'd been right most of those times. Then he read the memo and turned to the badge scan log and said, "Okay, this is different." That's the whole thing, right there. Not passion, not a scream in a restaurant, a conference badge that beeped at 1:52 in the afternoon. Calvin was charged with forgery under Ohio Revised Code 2913-31. He pled in February to 1 count, a 5th-degree felony, 3 years of community control, 200 hours of community service, and a restitution order of $61,300. No prison. I know people want prison. Prison isn't what happens to a man like Calvin in a case like this, and I made my peace with that faster than anyone expected me to. Stephanie surrendered her notary commission before the state could take it. The Secretary of State's office revoked it anyway, formally, with a 10-year bar on reapplication, and referred the matter out. Buckeye Trust walked her out of the building on a Monday morning after 9 years. She pled to falsification, a misdemeanor, and completed a diversion program. There's a version of this where I push for more, and Ashley told me I could. I didn't. Josie is 11 now. She didn't do anything. Whatever her mother is, that child once made me a birthday card with a hammerhead shark on it that said, "Aunt Brookie is the best, and also sharks are not mean, and I am not going to be the reason she visits somebody somewhere." That's not mercy, and it isn't forgiveness. It's just the one line I decided not to cross, and I've never regretted it. Renee Castellanos, CIA, Director of Internal Audit at Halverson Medical Supply, 17 years, opened a review in November after Buckeye Trust's suspicious activity referral. $19,400 in fabricated client entertainment across 14 months. Calvin was terminated for cause in December. His unvested commissions went with it. Doug Merrill, the regional VP who set down his fork at Marlowe's, gave a 2-hour statement that I have never read and never will. The divorce was heard by Magistrate Colleen Fahey in Franklin County Domestic Relations in April. She found financial misconduct. The apartment was awarded to me as traced separate property. My father's cashier's check, the closing disclosure, and his own bank record showing the withdrawal, all 3, exactly as Ashley had asked for in the first 11 minutes I ever spent in her office. The line of credit was voided as to me, and the note reformed against Calvin alone. I received a distributive award of $31,850 for the marital funds spent on Stephanie. The necklace was surrendered and sold. $19,200, which is what $38,000 of diamonds is actually worth when a stranger is buying them, and which tells you most of what you need to know about that entire marriage. We never used the tablet, not once. It was never mentioned, never produced, never argued about, and Calvin's attorney's demand letter died in a drawer because the strongest evidence I ever had against my husband was the sentence he chose to shout in a steakhouse in front of his own regional VP. 11 months later, I go by Brooke Renner now. It took 4 forms and $80, and the DMV lady said congratulations in a tone that suggested she'd read the room correctly. I stayed in the apartment. I thought I'd sell it. I don't sleep in the same bedroom. I moved into what used to be the office and made the master a library, which my therapist, Dr. Imani Blake PsyD, 14 years in practice, says is either very healthy or very literal, and that both can be true. The distributor distributive award went into the roof and a new furnace and the rest into savings. My father came over in June to look at the furnace install because he cannot help himself, and he stood in the hallway under the camera he still doesn't know the significance of and said, "This is a good building, Brookie." I said, "It is." He said, "I always thought so." I got my accounts back at work in March after the conflicts review closed. Wendell Pike wrote 3 sentences in the file that were the kindest thing anybody said to me that entire year, and they were entirely procedural, and I've kept a copy. Kristen gave me the Ziploc bag back in May, my old Samsung tablet with the date I'd written on it in Sharpie in a nurse's linen closet for a year and a half. I drove it to the county e-waste drop-off and put it in the bin without turning it on. I still don't know what those 4 messages said, past the ones I read at 3 in the morning on a couch in Clintonville. I never will. Some nights that bothers me more than the affair does, but I've spent 7 years finding numbers that people hit on purpose, and the job teaches you exactly one thing over and over until it's the only thing you believe. You never have to invent it. You just have to stop helping it hide.